Hi guys, welcome back to Mer Murder, where we put the Mer in murder. I'm your host, Mercedes Rose, and I'm so grateful that you guys are here for another week with me. Not only am I grateful and thankful and merry and jolly, but I'm super excited because if you're listening to this on the day it comes out, it's December 24th, which means I am almost 23 years old. And if you're listening to this any day after, that means I am 23 years old. I am so excited for my birthday this year. If you didn't pick up on that, my birthday is December 25th. Like I said in the beginning, if you even care. No, guys, I'm so extremely thankful to be seeing another year of life. I'm so happy that I made it this far. There was once a time where I was super depressed, I'm gonna be transparent with you guys. I used to struggle with my mental health pretty bad. I didn't think I would even see it the age 18. That's how bad it was. Like, I really was going through it. I was going through it as a teenager, but I'm so extremely proud and grateful to be seeing 23. I never thought I would make it this far, and I can't wait to make it even further, because even after all the things that I have been through in life, all the trials and tribulations, I have still been so blessed, so lucky, so fortunate, and I'm just so extremely grateful to be able to have another year of life and be able to spend another year doing what I love to do, doing what I want to do in life, doing something that's fulfilling for me. And I'm super glad you guys are here for this next chapter. I'm so grateful to be doing this every single day, every single week, every single second, every single hour, every single minute. I just want to say Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays if you don't celebrate Christmas. And I don't really have any life updates or anything crazy. I'm just super excited for my birthday. I'm never excited ever usually, oh my God, like I do not want anything to do with my birthday. But this year, for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's going to be a really great year. Not even maybe. I'm going to start speaking things into existence and saying really positive things. It is going to be a really great year. It's going to be one of the best years of my life, and going forward, that's how it's going to be from this point on. And I'm so excited and just so happy and so grateful and so thankful. And I can't keep saying the same things over and over because you guys are probably going to be like, all right, get this bitch out of the air. But thank you guys so much for joining me. Again, if you guys want to support the show or me, you can follow me on Instagram at Mer Murder. We have a TikTok page at Mer Murder. Again, I don't have any video just yet. We're still saving up for that camera, but when I do get back on there, you will definitely be seeing a lot more activity on the socials. The Instagram, as usual, will always have photos from the case, so that's always going to be the same, but actual video clips of me in the pod, that's going to have to be a little bit, but I am working on doing something short, something visual that people can still see on like TikTok and Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, anything that I can to get more interaction and engagement with the show. I am going to try to work on that, but for now, you just got to listen to my beautiful voice. And hopefully you don't miss my face too much. But yeah, thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you so much for being here with me on this journey. Thank you so much for everything that you ever do for me. And let's get into the show. So this episode is going to be a little bit different than usual. I guess you could say it's going to be like a Christmas special, if you will, but I figured that although murder doesn't take a break, not even for the holidays, I could at least highlight the good or best possible outcomes that do come out of our true crime stories, or at least some of them. So today I will be covering 3 of, in my opinion, the most tragic yet inspirational survivor stories. I do have a good friend of mine who, I don't think he's a fan of true crime, but I think he is a fan of me, a fan of mine, and I love him so very much, and I'm so thankful for his support. But these type of stories don't really make him that happy, but he does enjoy hearing survivor stories. So I thought I'll do this for him and I'll do this for you guys because, it is the holiday season. Although true crime doesn't stop for anybody, we should still take a second to try to find the light in everything. That's what life is all about, trying to find the good and the light in everything possible. So these stories aren't in any particular order of any kind, but I just wanted to take a moment to honor 3 brave and resilient people who helped put away the monsters who terrorized their communities for way too long. Our first survivor story of today's episode is actually a pretty notable one in the true crime community because of how much of a warrior and how courageous our victim was, especially at such a young age. Her name is Mary Ball McGriff, but at the time of the story, her name was Mary Ball Vincent. Mary was born in 1963 to a family of 9, including herself. She lived in Las Vegas, Nevada with her 6 other siblings, as well as her mother, who was a blackjack dealer and a member of the military, and her father, who was a mechanic. While Mary was growing up in her family home in Las Vegas, life was anything but a Vegas fantasy for the teen, as her parents were going through a very messy divorce. Amid all of the fights and disputes, Mary decided she had enough of this home environment. She gathered her things and took off one random day. At just 15 years old, she began her hitchhiking journey in the year of 1978, planning to leave from Las Vegas to Berkeley, California, where her grandfather lived. Mary stayed with her grandfather for a very short while before eventually realizing she missed home and she was way too homesick to stick around with her grandfather any longer. Before he knew it, she was already out of the house and on her way back to her family home in Nevada. And the same way Mary left Vegas was the same way she decided she would return, by hitchhiking. Now, hitchhiking has been around for a very long time, dating back as early as the 30s, but it was a pretty popular mode of transportation during the late 60s to the 70s. But you know what else was becoming pretty popular around this time too? The term stranger danger, which was actually coined in the 60s and warned people, specifically children, about the dangers of trusting someone you don't know, as around this time, child abductions became more and more apparent in society. But this concept was still pretty new to a lot of people, and there were many young people who still couldn't fathom the idea that a stranger could hurt them for seemingly no reason. So children like Mary were still at risk without even really knowing it. During Mary's journey back to her family in Las Vegas, she was accompanied by many other young people along the roads with signs telling passing vehicles where they were headed. Mary's sign, like two other people with her, said that they were going south. And not too long into her journey, on September 29th, 1978, a man pulled up in a large blue van. Mary and two other people approached the seemingly spacious and empty vehicle, looking hopeful to all be able to hitch a ride. But for some reason, the man let them know that he only had room for just one. Just Mary. The two people warned Mary that his request was beyond unsettling, and that it wouldn't be smart for a young girl to accept a ride from a man all alone. But Mary was more concerned than anything about making it back home to her family. She said she was just, quote, desperate to get home, and she couldn't live another day out alone. So Mary insisted she would be okay and hopped into the mysterious blue van, and with that, her and this strange man drove off. Mary and the man ventured off along the highway, and she said she was not immediately concerned for her safety while being in his presence. She felt that he was kind of like a grandpa, just helping her out. And Mary was so exhausted from her time out on the streets that she began to doze off in his company. Upon waking up, Mary realized that all the signs along the highway were going north instead of south. At some point while she was sleeping, the man turned the car around and headed in the opposite direction. As Mary realized, she immediately confronted the man. She said, quote, "Look, you're going the wrong way, and you know you're going the wrong way." This is when Mary started to notice just how scary her situation was about to become. The man pulled over in the middle of a deserted road, and Mary tried to escape under the guise of just getting out of the car to tie her shoe. But as soon as Mary got out of the car, everything went black. The strange man knocked Mary unconscious with a sledgehammer. The man proceeded to carry Mary's body into the van, tie her up, and then violently sexually assault her. Once Mary began to gain consciousness, she was still being attacked. The man continued to assault Mary another 5 times, and she endured every agonizing second before fatigue struck him and he fell asleep next to her. Mary, however, stayed awake the entire time. She said she begged God to, quote, set her free, and she just prayed the entire night into the day as she watched the sunrise. The following day, Mary, completely nude and battered, is confronted by the man. He said, quote, "You want to be free? I'll set you free." The man swung once at her left arm, severing her left forearm from her body, just below her elbow. Mary began kicking and screaming, clutching onto the man with her right hand, trying her best to prevent him from taking another arm. Unfortunately, the man overpowered her and began hacking away at her right arm. Mary could feel all the pain from the attack. She could feel the sharp, burning pain from the blows with the hatchet. She could feel the blood pour from her arms, and it was all so excruciating. As she lay there in the van, traumatized beyond belief, she could see the man outside of the van, struggling to flick something off of his arm. As she got a better view of him, she could see her right arm still clutching tightly onto his shirt as he's trying to flick her now severed arm from off of him. Eventually, once he was freed from the grasp of Mary's severed arm, he returned to the van. The man proceeded to drag Mary out of the van and onto the edge of a 30-foot cliff, where he tossed her mutilated body off the edge along with her arms. And without a second thought, he drove off, leaving Mary for dead. Luckily, though, Mary did not die. She not only survived her numerous attacks, but also the 30-foot fall from the edge of the cliff. Mary, exhausted and traumatized, thought to herself she could not just lay down and die, or else this man could do this to someone else. And against all odds, she got up. Mary shoved her severed arms into the dirt along the cliffside, packing the wound as much as she could to slow down the profuse bleeding. And she began crawling back up the cliff in the dead of night without any arms. As the night turned to morning, Mary, who was completely naked, covered from head to toe in blood, and missing both of her arms, walked along the middle of the road in hopes of getting anyone to stop and help her. But obviously, upon seeing her, many of the vehicles sped off even faster, unsure of what she had just been through, but sure that whatever danger she just faced was way too scary to even stop and find out about. Mary continued on and walked along Interstate 5 for a little over 3 miles before one brave couple in a truck, who actually was lost on their way to their honeymoon, pulled over. They quickly brought Mary into the vehicle and urged her to lay down and rest as they raced to the nearest phone booth to call and get Mary some help. Shortly after a phone call, a rescue helicopter arrived and flew Mary to a hospital, where it was revealed that Mary had lost over half the blood in her body and suffered extremely life-threatening injuries. But despite all this, Mary survived. Not only did she fight to live, but she also fought to identify and put away the man who did this to her throughout her time in the hospital. At one point, Mary even refused to sleep in order to help investigators finish their composite sketch of the man who raped and mutilated her. Just 10 days after Mary was rescued, her attacker was identified, arrested, and charged. 51-year-old Lawrence Singleton, a merchant seaman from Tampa, Florida, was identified as Mary's attacker. 6 months following the attack, Mary, although scared, faced Singleton in court and testified about her brutal encounter with her attacker just 10 to 15 feet away from her. Mary's testimony ensured that Lawrence Singleton was convicted of rape and attempted murder, where he was sentenced the maximum number of years you could get for those crimes in California, which was unfortunately just 14 years. The judge presiding over the case said, quote, "If I had the power, I would send him to prison for the rest of his natural life." Mary was also awarded $2.56 million in a civil judgment against Singleton, but never even saw the money due to Singleton being unemployed, in alleged poor health, and only having $200 in his savings. Now, this is where the story gets worse, if you can even believe that, because not only was Singleton sentenced to a mere 14 years for the brutal attacks on 15-year-old Mary, but he only served 8 years and was released on good behavior. Singleton then returned to Florida in 1990, where he showed his good behavior by being twice convicted of theft and served 60 days in prison for the first crime and then 2 years for the second. Then this, quote, confused and muddle-headed old man, which he referred to himself as, to the judge in the previous conviction, went on to murder a 31-year-old mother of 3, Roxanne Hayes, in 1997. Roxanne was found dead with multiple stab wounds to her upper body in Singleton's Sulphur Springs home in Florida, after neighbors called to report hearing the man assault the young mother. Imagine how infuriated Mary was to hear that the man that permanently wounded and brutally attacked her almost 20 years ago went on to murder a completely innocent woman. Well, that anger and disappointment in the system was enough for Mary to make an appearance at Singleton's 1998 sentencing and testify for a second time about her attack and why it is more important now than ever for this man to be put away for the rest of his life. Well, this time around, our victims got the justice they deserved, and on April 14, 1998, the judge sentenced Lawrence Singleton to death. However, the death penalty came a lot sooner for Singleton, as he was pronounced dead just 3 years later in 2001 in the prison hospital. His cause of death was cancer. Mary is known as more than just a survivor, but a warrior who continues to advocate for victims and survivors alike. Mary began using her prosthetic limbs just 2 weeks after her attack when she was 15, and eventually realized that her life did not have to be that much different. She went on to get married and have 2 sons, unfortunately divorcing that man, but remarrying her now husband, Tony McGriff. Following the outrage of Singleton's early release back in the late 80s, with the support of Mary, Singleton's bill was passed by the California legislation in 1987. It prevents the early release of offenders who have committed crimes in which torture is used, and it also carries the ability for offenders to be sentenced 25 years to life for these crimes. No matter how you look at it, Mary's bravery, persistence, and desire to live allowed for so many other young women to survive Lawrence Singleton, and also learn from her experience. It was the justice system that ultimately failed these women, but it goes to show that a woman's courage is sometimes all she needs to get justice, because Mary faced this man not only once, but twice, and continues to live to see the days that he doesn't, the days that he tried but failed to take away from her. And that is the story of Mary Ball Vincent-McGriff. Our next survivor is the sole survivor of none other than Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm sure you all are more than familiar with the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, as he is one of the most talked about serial killers in U.S. history. With over 11 movies, documentaries, and TV shows about his life and what led him to become the monster he was, Dahmer is somewhat of a household name, especially in the true crime community. But his gruesome attacks against the 16 young men he murdered in Milwaukee and one in Ohio often overshadow the story of the sole survivor among all of these murders. The man whose quick thinking and bravery is solely responsible for his capture. Tracy Edwards. Tracy Edwards was just 32 years old when he first came across Jeffrey Dahmer on July 22nd of 1991. Tracy and his two friends were hanging out at a local bar when they were approached by Dahmer, who offered them $100 each to take nude photographs of them back at his apartment. Although the men were reluctant at first, Tracy and his friends decided that they would accompany Dahmer back to his apartment, but first Tracy was going to be the one to go, and his two other friends would meet up with them later. Tracy left with Jeffrey to his apartment, but not before Dahmer gave his other two friends an address so that they could meet up later. However, this address was a completely different address than the apartment he was going to with their friend. Upon entering the apartment, Tracy noticed an extremely foul smell throughout the room, along with numerous boxes of hydrochloric acid on the living room floor. Dahmer, in an attempt to ease his concerns, told Tracy that the chemicals were just used for cleaning bricks, before leading him to the living room couch where he asked him to pose for the first few photographs. During the photographs, Dahmer asked Tracy to turn his head to the side to photograph him viewing the tropical fish in the tank. But this was really an attempt at getting Tracy distracted so Dahmer could get the opportunity to handcuff his hands behind his back. Luckily, Tracy noticed in time after just one cuff was placed on his wrist. He pulled away from Dahmer and quickly asked him, "What's happening?" Without any further explanation, Dahmer urged Tracy to his bedroom so that he could continue with the photo shoot. This is where Dahmer's behavior began to really concern Tracy as he pulls out a knife. Tracy could sense that he was in danger, so in an attempt to get Dahmer's guard down, he began unbuttoning Dahmer's shirt, explaining that they could continue with the shoot as long as he puts away the knife and removes the handcuffs. Instead of following through with the ultimatum, Jeffrey turned his back to Tracy and focused his attention on the TV. He began rocking back and forth and chanting to himself as Tracy just sat behind him watching. But before Tracy could understand what was happening, Dahmer stopped. He turned his attention back towards Tracy and began crawling on top of him, slowly forcing the man to lay against the bed. As Dahmer laid on top of Tracy, he placed his head on top of his chest, listening intently to his heartbeat. With the same knife pressed against Tracy's groin, Dahmer said that he wanted to eat his heart. Trying his best not to show any fear while also trying to get out of the situation, Tracy reminded Dahmer that he is his friend and that he won't try to escape, but he does have to use the bathroom. Tracy's mind swirled with possible ways to escape the apartment. He thought about running out the front door, which was left unlocked, or if worse comes to worse, he could jump right out the window at any first given chance. But he was snapped back to reality once Dahmer obliged with his request, sitting up and following him to the bathroom. On the way to the bathroom, Tracy also asked if they could sit out in the living room and have a beer together instead of returning to the bedroom, as there was actual air conditioning out there instead. Dahmer agreed and went to get the men some beers. After the first trip to the bathroom, Tracy sat with Jeffrey for a while, still on edge about how he could possibly escape from the situation. Eventually, he asked to use the bathroom once more, and as Tracy stood up from the couch, he punched Dahmer square in the face, knocking him to the ground. This was Tracy's one and only chance to escape the apartment, and without any hesitation, he took it. Tracy sprinted out of the apartment, outside the complex, and down the street in the middle of the night, flagging down Milwaukee police. At 11:30 p.m. on July 22nd, officers Robert Roth and Rolf Mueller noticed Tracy flagging them down, handcuffs still fastened tightly around one of his wrists. Tracy explained to the officers that he was just trapped in an apartment with a, quote, freak, who handcuffed him and held him for over 5 hours. He pleaded with the officers to remove them. Unable to do so, the officers agreed to accompany Tracy to the apartment where the man who handcuffed him lived in order to try and get him freed. This is the part of the story where officers Roth and Mueller discover apartment 213, the infamous apartment of Jeffrey Dahmer. The officers discovered the remains of 11 male victims, including 4 severed heads, 7 human skulls, 2 human hearts, 3 headless torsos, 2 complete skeletons, and dozens of Polaroid photos of nude and mutilated male corpses posed in numerous strange positions. Upon Dahmer's arrest, after failing to escape the police, he muttered to them, quote, "For what I did, I should be dead." And the rest is literally history, as Dahmer seemed to have been waiting for this moment for his entire criminal career. He confessed to every single crime he ever committed, and his trial began on January 30th of 1992, about 6 months following his arrest. During the trial, Tracy Edwards traveled back from Louisiana to Milwaukee, and he testified about his encounter with Jeffrey Dahmer on July 2nd, back in 1991. Tracy's testimony was a vital part of the trial, as he was the one and only victim of Dahmer's who could testify to Dahmer's behavior before the attacks and the state of his apartment, and whether or not it was alarming or not. Tracy found the strength to speak in front of the very man who he knew would have taken his life if he did not escape. The same man who he heard on the news brutally murdered 17 men and cannibalized 16 of them. Tracy explains to the court that Dahmer seemed like a nice guy, but then at times he would change and wouldn't seem like himself. Eventually, the topic turned to events leading up to Tracy's escape, and he slowly became more emotional as he recounted the events leading up to his escape and how he felt throughout those moments. Tracy explains the fear and anxiety he felt as Dahmer switched from being nice to threatening and from sad to scary. He even recalls one moment where Dahmer switched, and he told Tracy that Tracy would either have to kill him or he would have to kill Tracy. And Tracy said this was before Dahmer even had any drinks in his system. He powered through the rest of his cross-examination, and his bravery and courage to return to Milwaukee from Louisiana in order to testify against Jeffrey Dahmer was not in vain. Because as we know, Dahmer was sentenced to 16 counts of life in prison without the possibility of parole, and eventually ended up being beaten to death by another inmate, Christopher Scarver, while serving his time in prison on November 29, 1994, at the age of 34. Now, Tracy's life following his near-death experience is more tragic than our other victims, but I thought it would be important to take a moment to talk about how the cycle of trauma and murder continues on even for survivors. After being hailed a hero following his part in the capture of Dahmer, Tracy lived a less than heroic life. His defense attorney, Paul Koskinski, said that his life was, quote, like Humpty Dumpty after his encounter with Dahmer. He said, quote, it was like he was never able to put the pieces back together again. Tracy fell victim to drug and alcohol addiction and became homeless, bouncing from one shelter to another. And throughout his life living on the streets, he became all too familiar with crime. But this time, instead of being the victim, he was the perpetrator. Tracy has faced numerous charges including drug possession, property damage, failure to pay child support, bail jumping, and one charge in Mississippi was for the sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl. Tracy's charges and criminal behavior continued to escalate, and on July 26, 2011, at 51 years old, almost 2 decades to the day of his escape from Dahmer, Tracy found himself facing reckless homicide charges for the homicide of Johnny Jordan. According to news sources at the time, Tracy Edwards, Timothy Carr, and Johnny Jordan were all homeless around this time, and Carr and Jordan had a particularly volatile relationship. Some sort of altercation ensued between Jordan and Carr, and inevitably, Johnny Jordan was tossed off the side of a downtown Milwaukee bridge into the river below by Timothy Carr with the help of Tracy. Johnny Jordan's body was found shortly after, and the 2 other men were arrested and charged with their roles in his death. Tracy's charges were reduced to aiding a felon, and in July of 2012, Tracy was found guilty and sentenced to 1.5 years in prison with 2 years of supervision following his release. Now, that was all the way back in 2012, so it's been 13, almost 14 years since all this has happened, and no one, not even Tracy's defense attorney, Paul, knows of his whereabouts. But those in the community, including myself, really do wish Tracy well. Of course, his behavior in the 2010s is inexcusable and disgusting, and for that, he should be ashamed. But we also cannot forget that he may have led a completely different life if he did not come so close to death. Something like what Tracy experienced really does change people. It changes them greatly, and with the right resources, that can be a change for good, or in Tracy's case, it can be a change for the worse and lead someone down the darkest path. Regardless of who he became, without Tracy's bravery, many, many more young men would have continued to fall victim to Jeffrey Dahmer. So we can still acknowledge that even though Tracy fell victim to becoming part of the evil in the world, he still played a huge part in getting rid of some of it. And that is the story of Tracy Edwards. And our final survivor of the day is a woman by the name of Vanessa Gay. Vanessa Gay is one of 4 survivors, actually. One of the 4 women who survived her encounter with Anthony Sowell, more famously known as the Cleveland Strangler. Vanessa was originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and she was a Jehovah's Witness growing up. She says throughout her life she had always been an overachiever and a pretty good girl, trying her best not to cause any trouble for her mother, who already had a lot on her plate as she was the sole provider for her family and had the burden of caring for her younger brother who was suffering from sickle cell. Being a Jehovah's Witness, it was instilled in Vanessa that if she ever deviated from the rules she was taught, there was never really any going back. And she felt that to be true once she got older and met her husband at the time. Unbeknownst to her, Vanessa's husband was lacing the marijuana that they smoked with crack cocaine, causing her to go down a very dark path of drug addiction. Vanessa felt that she was a failure, and her life immediately took a nosedive. She began isolating herself from her family and children, feeling like she was a disappointment to them, and eventually spending more time out in the streets, even changing her name so she couldn't be found. In 2008, Vanessa crossed paths with Anthony Sowell, who walked past her on the sidewalk. Anthony made sure he was close enough for her to hear him exclaim that today was his birthday. Vanessa expressed a kind happy birthday to the man before he asked her if she wanted to celebrate his birthday with him because he had no one else to celebrate with. Vanessa was reluctant at first, but decided to accompany the man to his place so they could celebrate his birthday. During their walk to Anthony's house, the two shared a normal conversation. Anthony talked about his time in the Marines, and the two bonded over who could be better at cooking. The whole time, Vanessa noticed during their walk, Anthony was greeted by many people on the street. He seemed to be pretty popular in the neighborhood, and this put her at ease. She said, quote, "The streets would let you know if you were with someone bad, so there were no red flags." Vanessa was comfortable and glad that she was with a seemingly friendly neighborhood man. However, that feeling of ease quickly became unease as the pair arrived at Anthony's house. Vanessa said the house just looked dark and empty, like there was no life in it. She felt that she should just turn around and leave, especially after seeing how many locks were locked back behind her once she entered the home. It didn't take long for this nightmare to unfold for Vanessa, as she was hit with this overwhelming stench once she got further into the home. Anthony quickly explained the smell away by stating that there was a nearby meat factory, and it caused the whole block to smell. The two ventured further up the stairs, and after about 15 minutes passed, with the two just making small conversation, Vanessa became confused. She was waiting for Anthony to get this alleged party started. And she said, "Well, okay, what's up? Are we going to smoke or anything?" Trying to get Anthony to begin the festivities. And he asked if Vanessa had a pipe to smoke with. As soon as Vanessa located her pipe and handed it to him, Anthony took the first hit of drugs, and a switch flipped. Anthony immediately became violent, punching Vanessa directly in the face, beating and threatening her. Eventually, the physical abuse became sexual, and Anthony Sowell began raping Vanessa. She said the assault was constant, and she endured her pain for hours into the next day. The following day, shocked and unsure how to get out of this situation, Vanessa asked Sowell if she could use the bathroom, and he allowed her to, slowly walking her to the restroom. As Vanessa went into the bathroom, she noticed a room across from it. It appeared that there was someone in there, but not just someone. It appeared that there was a headless corpse wrapped in plastic. Vanessa was in complete shock. She could not believe her eyes, but she knew that if she reacted, her fate would not be any good. So she held her composure and continued into the bathroom. Vanessa was frozen, thinking of ways to leave her DNA or even traces of evidence that she was in the house, so that if she did not live to tell the story, there would have been a way for the police to discover that she was there. She decided to leave her underwear there as evidence in hopes that if she did make it out, officers would believe her, and when they searched the home, they would believe her story and see that her underwear was left there, so everything she said was true. Vanessa returned from the bathroom and back into Anthony's presence. She knew there was only one way to escape from this house: if Anthony Sowell freed her himself. Vanessa began gaining his trust in efforts to get him to release her. She even led him to believe that she would come back another day, leaving her phone number with him. And against all odds, Sowell let Vanessa free from his house of horrors. Vanessa, obviously battered and bruised, sought help immediately, or at least she tried her best to. However, no passerbys on the streets stopped to help her at all. Eventually, Vanessa's body began to give out as she tried to get as far away as possible from Sowell's house. She tried calling police, but they rejected her pleas to come get her. Instead, they said Vanessa would have to come to the station herself to talk about what happened to her. This not only broke Vanessa's heart, but also her spirit. Vanessa felt that her life was worthless, and she actually never even ended up going to the police station. A little over a year later, on October 31st, 2009, Anthony Sowell was arrested after the report of a sexual assault, and his house was searched. It was then that the remains of 11 women were found in his home, and the news sent shockwaves throughout the community of Cleveland, Ohio. The news reached everybody in the community, including one of our survivors, Vanessa Gay, who inevitably relapsed as the trauma from her encounter with Sowell resurfaced. It was in 2010 when Vanessa was due in court for a charge against her. It was there where she explained to the judge why she was the way that she was. She explained what she went through, the evil she faced and survived, and the judge immediately ordered the guards to remove her handcuffs and promised her that he would get her the help she deserved. Throughout her time in jail, Vanessa finally got the help that she was promised. She was part of a survivors group where she learned to healthily cope with her trauma, and she began to grow and heal immensely. On June 29, 2011, Vanessa mustered up the courage and strength to face Anthony Sowell in court and testify to the horrific things he did to her over 3 years prior. Vanessa was extremely emotional during her testimony as she recounted the events that took place. But she knew in her words that, quote, she had to be the voice for the voiceless. Vanessa powered through her cross-examination and testimony, and she was more than relieved to witness the jury find Sowell guilty of all of his charges and ultimately sentenced to death. Following the conviction of Sowell, his Cleveland House of Horrors was torn down in 2011, an event attended by many, including Vanessa. She felt that the demolition of the property gave her the peace of mind that the house will no longer stand there as a grim, constant reminder of what her and other victims endured, and the locals couldn't go in and explore the gruesome scene like it was some sort of playground. Furthermore, the Garden of 11 Angels, a memorial, was built and revealed to the public on November 6 of 2021. The memorial stands in the exact spot where the house Sowell murdered and concealed the bodies of the victims stood. It brought honor to the victims and peace to their families that the women they lost would never be forgotten, and that they did in fact matter to the city, even if it did not feel that way. The ribbon cutting for the memorial came just 9 months after Sowell's death in February of 2021 from an unnamed terminal illness. Also around the time of Sowell's death, Vanessa and her lawyers were actually planning on how to prosecute him for her attack, as he was not originally tried or convicted for her sexual assault. However, unfortunately, he died just days later, so Vanessa never got her direct justice. But Vanessa survived. Vanessa Gay, Latundra Billups, Sean Morris, and Gladys Wade Thomas all survived their encounters with Anthony Sowell, and they have continued to live their lives not only for themselves and their families, but for the women who weren't lucky enough to say the same. The women have advocated for victims of sexual assault, and they continue to tell their stories, thankful that they even get the opportunity to do so every chance that they get. And this has been the story of Vanessa Gay and her bravery and courage that helped her survive and put away her attacker. All of our survivors, Mary McGriff, Tracy Edwards, and Vanessa Gay, exemplify strength, courage, and resilience, something we see in most, if not all, of our victims in our true crime cases, because we know no one ever really goes down without a fight. Unfortunately, some of our victims lost the fight, but today we get to celebrate those who won. We won't have any opinions or ratings this episode. I know that's a lot of people's favorite part, but I just don't think it's necessary today because the real heroes in our cases were our survivors, and I want all the attention to be on them. And of course, before we wrap up the episode today, I want to leave you guys with resources. If you or someone you know was the victim of rape, sexual assault, any sort of sexual violence, there are a ton of resources available for you. You can call 800-656-4673, and you can also visit www.nsvrc.org for help. Our sources for today's episode have been abcnews.com, allthingsinteresting.com, I Survived on Tubi, newyorkpost.com, yahoo.com, and wikipedia.com. And with that, I just want to thank you guys all so much for listening to today's episode. I am so grateful that you guys are here. I'm so grateful to be spending another year of life with you guys. And I'm so happy that the women in our cases survived, the women and men. I'm so happy that we can always find a light in every piece of darkness in this world. And I'm just so extremely grateful for being here. I'm so extremely grateful that you guys are all here. And above all, make sure you take care of yourselves, make sure you take care of each other, and make sure we all look out for each other, okay? Before I go, make sure you follow the Instagram at Mer Murder, the TikTok at Mer. We got our Discord group, so please feel free to follow that. I only got like 2 friends in there, so please, if you guys want to discuss anything regarding true crime or follow up with any cases, you can go ahead and head to the Discord. That's all going to be, all links for everything are going to be in all the episode bios, all the show bios in the world. And thank you guys so much for your support. And yeah, that's all I got. I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to Mer Murder, where we put the Mer in Murder. Can't wait to see you guys next week for Mer in Murder as we put more Mer in Murder. I love you guys so much. Bye.